Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now joining me is the year older David Morassutti.
Year older, well, in a few months.
This is the 2022 version of David Morassutti.
Yeah,
It's been upgraded.
sure, we'll go with that.
It's been upgraded. I stopped being upgraded because I'm I'm like Windows 10. After this year, I don't do any. There don't be any upgrades. So this is the only version everybody's gonna see. Sorry, folks.
It's all good. We got it. You know what? 20 with the way things are going right now, we need to loosen the mood. We need to relax a little bit. We need to have a little bit of fun. We just gotta
Oh,
gotta
fun.
levy it up a little bit. You know.
Well, I guess the biggest story right now in the Canadian Football League has to be the move made by the Hamilton Tiger Cats by the owner Bob Young to take on partners. He still maintains control of the team. The majority of the financial interest in the team. But he's bringing in people, interesting people that he's bringing in. Stelco and the people there are diehard Cat fans and have had a lot to do with the Cats. Jim Lawson, who used to be the chairman of the board of the CFL, and in case you didn't know, his daughter's Brody Lawson, who was an on-air person for CFL.ca.
So for Goodbine right now as well.
Yeah, and they bring a lot of Canadian Football League experience with them. And the team, I don't know, David, do you see anything in the timing with this?
I wouldn't say with the timing, but I find the move very interesting because actually one of the person who is representing Stelco, I was actually trying to find the person's name. Oh yeah, Alan Kestebaum.
Right.
I'm hoping I'm saying his name correctly. Actually has a bit of experience.
He owns a part of an NFL team.
Yeah, he's part of the board of the Atlanta Falcons, which I find quite interesting because who I think it was Dave Naylor who said that this is one of the first instances where somebody who has NFL ties also has CFL ties in terms of ownership. I find that quite interesting.
And it isn't something that is normal in sports. And I think with the CFL, they basically have a hands-off approach with the owners in relation to what other leagues have. There's all kinds of stuff that would happen in this case if it was the National Hockey League, as you know.
Yeah, and like the formation. So now they're called the Hamilton Sports Group. It really, I think, signifies a change in attitude around the Tiger Cats as well because we've always heard of like the community team. Now they're technically a corporation when you also consider the other. We talked about this throughout the year about the different levels, different types of ownerships. Right, you had corporations like MLSC, OSEG, I think Ottawa Sports Entertainment Group.
Calgary's the same thing.
Calgary, the same thing. So really, Hamilton's kind of leaning towards that realm. I mean, a little bit now. These people all have ties to Hamilton. They're all, this is not
Lawsons are born in Hamilton. So,
exactly. So like this they're not leaving the roots of Hamilton, but it's quite interesting that they are making this move into that direction because especially not just for the Tiger Cats, but for Forge FC, the Canadian Premier League team that they own as well. It's quite interesting that you're seeing a combine now that they're combining the two in this regard.
And it's something that we're seeing more and more in sports, where it's basically an amalgamation of more interests in a city being attached to, whether it be the National Hockey League in Canada, whether it end up being an NFL team in the US like we have in Buffalo. And now we had recently the New England um, sports group or something was that bought the Pittsburgh Penguins. And they own a couple of teams in the country of different sports.
Right. Yes. The team that I think it's the company that has ownership in the Boston Red Sox.
Absolutely. They had interest in MLSC at one time.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's very interesting that you see. And you know what? And in this realm too, when you talk about how the CFL has really hurt financially, the last thing you would expect is another corporation to decide, you know what? Let's get into the CFL business, because that's sure, like we always talk about how MLSC is dishing out all this money, and it almost seems like, I wouldn't say charity, but no, they're not making money. They're not in the business to make money with the Argos.
You're almost suggesting that what's happening is you get a lot of people with deep pockets sharing the burden of owning a CFL team.
Yeah, and you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if this is part of that. And also, I mean, again, I'll bring up the idea of having someone who has a minority, ownership stake in the NFL. There's probably some desire to bring some of those ideas north of the border.
Absolutely. And there that's going to change a little bit of Bob Young's thinking and attitude towards the corporate way of dealing with the Canadian Football League. He's always been a guy who all you have to do is follow his Twitter feed. He's not a big fan of MLSC and corporations and the way his team, or the way he feels the Canadian Football League is the way it operates. With the impact and effect of corporations like MLSC. He's made it very clear with a lot of his tweets how he feels about that. So I'm not sitting here telling untold stories. This is something that if you follow him on Twitter, you'll hear it yourself. So, does it mean that Bob Young's corporate attitude, does it get softened now? Is this evidence that maybe, not that he's seen the light or anything, not that he has to see the light, but that he understands that, when it comes to the operation of the Canadian Football League, maybe you need deep pockets. It's a reality. Not every team can be like you said, when we were talking earlier about, community owned teams, not every organization is that well run. And by well run, I mean bottom line well run. I don't mean that MLSC doesn't do a good job of running the Argonauts. That's not what I'm talking about. But well enough run that there's a bottom line to figure out what to do with, which some teams in the Canadian Football League are threatening not to have. For example, in British Columbia and BC, Montreal, they're not flush with money.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the resources that, like, let's be real here. Corporations, the advantage they have. Look, yes, there is that CFL's management cap, but there's other ways that you can implement resources for your team, both on and off the field, right? And I think maybe for Hamilton, this is a way to kind of modernize their structure a little bit more too, because look, they've had, I think, with 2 3 owners, who have minority stakes or who have had a share of the pie. They've never really had maybe this type of financial backing from people who have, and also the cross brand, right? Jim Lawson is huge with Woodbine Racetrack. There's the cross promotion there. Stelco, they probably have, you know, their benefit in some way to promoting the Tiger Cats through their business. That's another tool that these corporations can use, and we're going into a time where you need to figure out other ways to generate buzz for your teams.
Another thing that you're ringing it, you're rimming it right now, but I'm going to see if I can sync it for you. Also, they have an ability, right? Being corporations, they have contacts. you know, in the community that maybe financially speaking can be rewarding. Once you're in a corporate room or a boardroom, as you know, and as I hope everybody realizes, every boardroom has people in it that are in other boardrooms. It's a spider web of boardrooms. Like, so if you get in, let's say in MLSC, it's not just MLSC that you're getting involved with. There are other people in that boardroom that you meet on a regular basis, and you talk about how can we help each other, and the Canadian Football League and teams in the Canadian Football League need some help getting the message out there that this league's here. It's a great game, and how can we, get in contact with people?
And not only that, it's not just the people in the community; it's the sponsors they have too, right?
Well, there you go. Yep.
MLSC has their group of
Swoosh.
sponsors. I'm sure these other groups have theirs, and this is we're seeing it now. In we never thought we see the day where NHL would consider putting advertisements on jerseys. Well, guess what? There's money to be made. They're gonna do it. Um, if they're they started with the helmets, and now it's gonna likely go down to the jerseys. Like, this is just the way business. Like, you have to modernize your business. We've been talking about this for a long time. The CFL has been needing to find a way to modernize the business, to find new revenue, because it just has not been there.
And desperation, David, because that even strikes with the National Hockey League, that there are streams of money that they're not getting right now, that they got years ago, that they're not getting right now, and they haven't had for a while. For example, tickets. And it's a very sensitive, that money has to be made up somehow. And the same thing's true in the Canadian Football League. They have to figure out how to create monetary streams, sorry, money streams. And they do it with, they don't do it with video games, but they're trying to do it with gambling. But all these things, they feed the same purpose, which is increasing the brand's size and scope, right? So that people outside of the regular group of fans become aware of the league and then maybe take part in it. I maintain that the reason the XFL started talking to the Canadian Football League is that they were telling football fans north of the border that we're coming back, and making people aware of that league. I think that was part of it too. The same way the Canadian Football League, with talking to the XFL, was getting some advertising in the US about the league's existence and people becoming aware of it.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really part of the CFL's problem right now? People know what the CFL is, but if you ask people who's involved in the CFL, a lot of them couldn't tell you, right? You got to find some way to get some recognition out there. I'm not saying the ownership group alone is going to change that, but if you have more people interested in your team and making your team profitable, it only helps your team more, right? We thought that with MLSC taking,
There you go.
you look at it, if you thought MLSC, they don't want to have a loser on, I don't want to say a loser, but they don't want to have something, a reputation like the Argos on their hands for this long. They want to start having things get better because it only helps them, and then it turns it helps the Argos.
And if you're the CFL, when MLSC came in, there were a lot of people who said, "Oh, okay, now the Argos are going to be for real. Now the Argos are going to have the kind of ownership that's going to drive up interest." Well, it didn't happen. So, you have to figure out what to do from there. And I don't know what the plans that the Argos have right now in improving, the fan base here. But I do know one thing, is the volatility of the Canadian Football League that we became accustomed to with players has now become an issue with coaches. And not just in Toronto, as we're seeing now, it's happening a lot with Chris Jones taking a lot of Argo coaches and taking them to Edmonton.
Mm. Yeah, you want to get into that right now? Because
No, that's
I saw that we saw this coming, though, right? We when as soon as What's the big thing you always see when you bring in?
When you bring in Chris Jones, there's going to be a lot of coaches moving because
Well, not
love him
surprisingly,
or hate him. Chris Jones has a loyal following, and that
oh yeah,
loyal following goes not just with players, goes with coaches even more.
yeah. It's not just with the players. There are people you want to work with and you want to continue to work with as much as you can. It just becomes a matter of, can you get them to join along, and you know will they be comfortable leaving this? It's not a big bang that you're going to leave a situation maybe that you're doing all right with to a situation you don't know what it's going to be like. But this is in lies, as you said, when you have that relationship with someone like Chris Jones, and you know what they're about, you know their track record, it makes it a little bit easier, that's for sure.
And
uh,
the financial commitment that coaches don't get now that they used to, it translates into not a disloyalty, but a lack of commitment because, quite frankly, there are some coaches who are doing it almost for nothing, and if somebody offers you some money, going from nothing, imagine out there, folks, if you're just doing something because you enjoy it, and then somebody says, hey, I'll pay you for that, you know, a little bit of money goes a long way when there's a lot of no money around, is my point. So the volatility for coaching now is starting to get, almost ugly, right? In fact, teams like Winnipeg and Calgary look unusual in the middle of the way the league operates.
yeah, and let's not forget with that, when you also talk about money, you also talk about responsibilities too, right? you know
Absolutely.
Stephen McAdoo, who is the offensive line coach in Toronto, you don't think he wants to take a job as an offensive coordinator where you get a little more responsibility? And that, I mean, it also comes with a bit of a pay raise, but I'm sure he would prefer to go with something like that. Jarius Jackson, he's it's almost it's not a it's a it seems like a lateral decision because he's going from one quarterback coach to another, but he's gonna get some more response. I find it interesting that he's the quarterbacks coach, but he's also going to be the pass game coordinator. So that's you know for Jerry, he's probably asking Chris Jones, well, why am I going to leave the Argos where I'm already a quarterbacks coach to be your quarterbacks coach? He says, well, how about this? We'll make you the passing game coordinator. Like
Here's
that's how
that.
you sweeten the pot a little bit.
Yeah, titles
No.
for whatever they're worth. Titles are fine, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at the 9 teams, and we're seeing, just real quick, BC Lions, just for the sake of throwing information out there, they re-signed Nationals Tanner Dahl and Hakeem Johnson, Rhymes Norman and Guzlek Messam. Um, this is a team that underperformed, and their coaching staff is staying pretty much the same, right? So they've got a bit of continuity. How much change do you see a team like that making during the off season?
Oh, and also they brought back Dominic Rhymes. Was
Absolutely.
another like that. That was a pretty significant name
And
there.
you notice a lot of the players that are being signed right now are the Canadians.
Yeah, and usually, well, and see that's the thing, right? You try to bring back as many of the Canadians that you have, because to bring in new Canadians, you got to bring them in up to speed. Right now, every team right now is probably trying to make sure they have as much of their Canadian depth as possible,
Uh
because
huh.
that's the number one desire in free agents. I understand free agency
I
can be
think
about the
I
privilege.
think I think it's being proven that
Yeah.
they're going to do what they, because the truth is Canadian players are a limited. There is a limited quantity and quality of Canadian players in comparison to the American import players, right? So they got to get with the Canadians first, because they can fill easier with the Americans than they can with the Canadian. So we're going to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I think the I hate to say this, but the best thing about Winnipeg doing what they did the last 2 years, I maybe woke up a lot of CFL teams to prioritize the
Good
right
luck.
area. But
Good
then, yeah,
luck.
and then guess what? You're like, okay, let's try to. Oh, this
It's
happened.
ironic. It truly is ironic, David, because usually when a team wins a championship, it becomes harder to hang on to them. But
Yeah,
all you hear out of Winnipeg, guys resign, coaches resign. I want to stay here. I like what we got going on. I mean, you hear teams talk about that, saying, let's keep the band together, right? But not many teams in sports are able to do it. But Winnipeg has done a God, I'd like to know what the magic, what's in the water in Winnipeg, because they've done a great job of doing that, of keeping people in Winnipeg. And the cap is static for both management and the players.
I think the other thing too to think about here is, we're talking about how hard it is to find Canadians. Part of it also is where are they being developed, right? Who's
Right.
developing the Canadian talent? We're seeing teams trying to lure some of them from the schools in the States that are going to try to make the NFL, but the outside chance isn't great. So, hey, maybe consider the CFL and they still take them in the draft. But I think this is a bit of a wake up call to the CFL that, hey, if you really want, your Canadian pipeline to be better, and you don't want it to be seen as a, you know oh, teams have to grab these guys. No, you should be making the investment in the air, in the grassroots programs to ensure that your pipeline has enough, not just the quality of talent, but the quantity of that quality. I think is so important because, again, I'm going to say this again. What's the one position a team has not drafted, developed, and used in the CFL? Quarterback position. Why? Because CFL teams are not invested enough, not only to develop the Canadian quarterback, but the CFL has put nearly to none investment in making sure that the Canadian talent is there for the teams to recognize, and there's no incentive to grab them either.
Well, there's been talk over the years that, are there do you make a quarterback a Canadian? Like, can we count a quarterback as a Canadian? No. I suppose that's because the teams don't think there's enough Canadians, but I happen to think that if they did something like that, there would be quarterbacks that are Canadian. Nothing breeds, something more than necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention. So if it became necessary to get an advantage by Canadians, by adding a Canadian who's a quarterback, then they're going to do it. And I just don't see why we have this lack of faith in young Canadian men who decide to be quarterbacks, who go and ply their trade in the OUAA. Some who've been to the US, as we are well aware.
Mhm.
And if there was a commitment to train them, like you're saying, giving them a chance to show what they can do, I'm totally convinced that they'll do well. Because if there's no other proof, just look around the sports world and look at the Canadians that are so successful in the other sports. They're competing toe to toe with Americans in basketball, baseball, hockey forever. We're seeing it in football now too. So it's not a question of whether a Canadian can't do it. It's the question is, can a Canadian get a chance to show they can do it? That's all that's left. That's all that's missing.
And part of it too is where are they going to get that spotlight? I had the opportunity to learn about Chase Claypool's story and how he went from VC. This was a guy who was playing in BC, wasn't really getting looked at, sending film to U.S. schools until eventually he got interest down at Notre Dame. Same with Chuba Hubbard. There's so many of these guys that are just looking for the chance, and and what it all comes down to is they're looking for down the states, because down in the states they have the infrastructure with all the prep schools and all the clinics that you can go to and attend to, the colleges with you know the better facility, the more exposure, and that's really it too. And maybe you can take advantage of that and saying, hey, you know what, we might not be able to develop them here, but if we give them the access to those programs down there, if we have a bit of a relationship, and then say, hey, if it doesn't work down there, come up to this league up in the CFL where you can make some money and make a living playing football, and you don't, and that's something you can consider down the road.
And if you have any talent whatsoever, we'll try to foster it and make it grow and make you a better player. There are a lot of young Canadian kids that are going down to quarterback schools in Florida
Yeah.
that are that go there for a long time, and they go to learn about being a quarterback. And the reason they do that is because of what you said. There really isn't much up here to do that. And this is not I'm not trying to throw shade on universities in Canada, but universities in Canada are not um, they're not in the business of producing football players. They're not, not all of them. The point I'm trying to make is there are only a few schools in Canada that have a reputation, a handful of schools, to your point, right? Why they go to the US. There's only a handful of schools in Canada that when the football player goes there, he goes there and knows he's going to come out much better than he went in. In some cases, they're going to schools, they're playing football, and they're moving almost laterally as far as improving their football acumen, right? And so that's why, and this is the nice thing about, we should congratulate Canadian kids who come out of OUAA or out of Canadian colleges who get a chance to learn the game and play well as Canadians, because a lot of their learning they have to do is when they get to the Canadian Football League. They're starting, at a lot less knowledge than a lot of the other players that go there. So a lot of times the Canadians that come into the Canadian Football League, well, last year a Canadian won the MOP of the 2019, won the MOP for top player in the Grey Cup, and he's one of the best running backs in Canada. He came out of high school. He didn't even come through the Canadian colleges. He came through junior football. So, and look what he became. So, it's important that there's an avenue for talented football players in Canada that can't go to the US. And in Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, BC, and Quebec, and we have some colleges here in Ontario. But on the younger side, those provinces do a bit better job than Ontario and some other provinces. Quebec is notorious for it, with CEGEP. And of course, out west, you have the junior leagues in Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, and of course in BC. They're very good, and we've seen players develop there. So, that's the biggest problem we have, is that we don't have a uniform development program in Canada outside of the colleges. And the colleges aren't there to support football. They're there. Okay, we'll have a football team. And then there's the ones that do really well, and then that's an important thing for them, like the Westerns of the world, McMaster,
Laval.
Ontario, Laval. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just not enough. I think you're totally right. Is that a lot of Canadian athletes aren't going to those universities that per se for sport. They're going for an education. They're going to that's first and foremost usually in one of
We're
the
not
top.
we're not we don't develop elite athletes in the sense of professional sports. We have elite athletes that make it to the Olympics, but they're not doing it because they're at the university or the college. They're doing it outside of the university and the college.
Well, not only that, there are some Olympic Canadian athletes that are competing in U.S. schools and going to U.S. schools.
Here we go
Um,
again.
I'm going to bring up one of our Olympic medalists in swimming. Oh my God, why am I Maggie McNeil? She swims for, hey, Eduardo, where are you? I'm pretty sure she goes to the
Michigan,
University of Michigan, the Wolverines. I know that's his school, that's his team. But why is she there? Because
they
guess what?
lost this weekend, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, we won't. I wasn't gonna want to be the one to bring it up, but I guess
I'd be.
I'll.
I'm glad to.
but but here it goes. He's probably there because she's probably there because that's going to give her the best education, the
Yeah.
best chance to compete, prepare, train. because first and foremost, she wants to be an athlete, and that's where you go,
Absolutely.
where you want to be an athlete.
Yeah, well, it's where you have to go. That's the way it goes. I mean, we all, we all have to learn somewhere, right? We all
Yeah.
have to learn um, at the best possible circumstance, whatever that happens to be, right? There's no way I'm selling you on the idea that Canadian colleges are terrible schools for teaching football. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But they're not built to produce players because the competitive edge that exists in the United States, not only in the top level universities, but you go Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, Division 4. And just so folks understand, I'm not criticizing Canadian colleges. Division 4 quarterbacks do well in the Canadian Football League. Just, think about that. Just think about that alone, that you get Division 4 quarterbacks come to the Canadian Football League and they do a good job. Imagine all the other teams we're talking about that are actually better than Division 4, that are in Division 3, 2, and 1. Just imagine. So, we don't have that luxury.
No, we don't. And I'm going to bring up, because I know he was just re-signed by Calgary, and I thought this was a bit of an intriguing move. But Jake Mayer, he came from UC Davis, who that's a Division 1 school, but it's not one that has a massive track record of success with football. But like that's where it is. You're not seeing the big schools developing quarterbacks for the CFL, but you're seeing enough. But there's enough investment in these NCAA schools that what you may not go to the state championship, the national championship, but you might get recognized elsewhere.
David, you're preaching what we were talking about to begin with.
Yeah,
Give a person a chance. They'll surprise you more often than not.
yeah.
It's just a chance that we're talking about here. Like a kid like him is not going to get a chance because he's not at a big school. The draft room isn't thinking about him. They're not thinking about him on the draft board. Never mind, he's not on the draft board. I don't even think he's on a piece of paper in the room, if you know what I mean. And this kid gets a chance to show what he can do. And the mayor of Calgary did a great job. So why can't that be the same story for a Canadian quarterback? That's what I don't understand.
No, that's for sure. I'll even bring in another point here. There was a Canadian running back who declared for the NFL draft recently. Daniel, I hate some of these names; they're so hard. Out of Boy Bay, I'm going to probably butcher that name, but he just declared for the 2022 NFL draft, which means he's automatically added for the CFL draft. Born in Toronto, played his high school football in Pennsylvania, and has spent the last 4 years at Bryant University. Will he make the NFL? Maybe if a team decides to take an opportunity or a chance. But this is another case where a CFL team could look at him, a skill position in the CFL running back, to have a Canadian running back. They'll take a chance on him in the CFL draft. But this is just another case where he decided his best development path was not in Canada, it was in the States. And that's just a reality for a lot of these Canadian athletes that have a desire to play professionally, whether south or north of the border. The road does not go through Canada usually. It goes through the States and then back
Yep.
at some point.
So we started with talking about ownership in Hamilton and it changing, and that's a good thing. We talked about the issue now about quarterbacks. If you've just joined us, and both David and I think that Canadians should get a better shot, but that shot can only happen if there's enough, enough of a grooming phase for these athletes, and they really do need a lot of grooming. That I understand that, and they're lacking in a lot of ways. But one thing Canadians aren't lacking in is in heart and ability, I think, given the chance. Then we talked a little bit about Chris Jones. So Chris Jones is putting together his lineup of coaches, and he's redrawing. He's drawing from previous people that he's had before. Ottawa's a different story. It seems like things are a little quieter in Ottawa. David, if I can change where we're at, well, the Red Blacks, with Sean Burke, are bringing in people but not as quickly as, let's say, Hamilton has or Chris Jones has. They're going to, they probably might not be that concerned about changing the coaching staff because the head coach is there. And I think La Police has pretty much the people he likes. And if he doesn't like them, they'd have been gone by now.
Yeah, no, I think so. I actually think if the coach, like sometimes the GM or the president comes in and they say, "I'm going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to evaluate everything." But in the case where you bring in a new GM, if he's not sold with the guy as the head coach and wants to bring someone in himself, he's going to do it himself. But again, in the CFL, the caveat here is you can't just fire a coach. You can't just let a coach go because there's a budget you have to work with. So who are you bringing in to replace them? And what if this coach has a pretty lengthy contract? To get a guy like Paul Lapolis in Ottawa likely meant that they had to probably give him a few years, right? He's not coming
Absolutely.
on a 1 or 2 year deal. It could have been a 3 year deal or 4 year deal. That's just my guess. But that's the other thing to keep in mind as well. But I also think that if you're Sean Burke, you're looking at Owen and you're saying, have we really given Paul Police all the tools to be as good of a coach as he needs to be? Because I also think that GMs need to take a hard look in the mirror and say, did we put our coaching staff in a position to succeed? And if you look at the Ottawa Red Blacks in 2021, I don't know what coach could have taken that roster and make it successful.
I think they have to be patient just because,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
I think
David,
that's
I
the right
think
approach.
patience is just, they got to financially because they don't have the luxury of making that great idea happen. They're stuck with people until, because whatever move that the new GM makes is going to have to be a certain move, careful steps at this point, because every GM, as soon as they hire a coach or even when a GM is hired by a team, there's a commitment there that really will bite you in the behind if you make a mistake, and it's a mistake that lives, like, we've seen in Toronto where they're still paying a head coach there along with the one they have now, and then there's a general manager thing too, because I believe, um, I think Pop was, yeah, I think Pop was in his last year, so I don't think they're burdened by his pay, but you know we know that it's really hard to change coaches just because you don't like that coach and you don't think he's doing a good job, because he takes part of the budget with him when he goes.
It's something that has made decisions a lot tougher on teams that want to do a restart, a proper restart. But then again, this is the CFL also telling teams, hey, you can't just be throwing money around because the players are telling us that that's not fair. That teams are just throwing money at coaches left, right, and center. But then when it comes to players, we're not too sold with you. We're gonna cut you. Or, you know what? You're making 120,000, but we got a rookie here that's doing quite all right. That's making 70,000.
Bo Levi Mitchell, $100,000 in the middle of this month, January. Decision has to be made in the middle of January by Calgary whether they want to give him that extra $100,000 bonus.
That's gonna be such an interesting one because there is a GM that is looking for a quarterback and has made it known he's looking for a quarterback. And the last thing, if you're Calgary, you do not want that guy taking the drive to Edmonton, knowing full well that he will take the opportunity to grab him.
There's a good chance that he will, and I'm just wondering, who else quarterback wise. You bring up Chris Jones, and uh, where else could Bo Levi go? Because to trade for him, the contract would have to be renegotiated.
I think
And,
so.
would Calgary, if they succeed in renegotiating the contract to an extent where trading him is a bad idea, or do they trade him because they just gotta, because they've come close. They've asked Bo Levi each year, the last 2 years, can you take a haircut? Can we pay you a little less? We could really use some money on the rest of the team. So the middle of January is going to be a very interesting situation for Calgary. But here's what I'm going to say about Calgary. Calgary is a very good organization. And I think as a good organization, the last thing they want to do is give up on a star player like Bo Levi Mitchell, who's won a Grey Cup with them, and have him go, because that just doesn't sit with me in my mind. That wouldn't fit into the Calgary way of doing things, in my opinion. I think they're going to
No
fight
way.
doing that as hard as they can.
They're you know what Calgary is doing is smart. Jake Muir may be the guy that replaces Bo Levi Mitchell, but they're not ready to just totally throw in the towel on Bo Levi Mitchell as well.
Nope.
But here's the caveat: Bo Levi Mitchell has some leverage in this situation, because if Calgary says, you know what, we don't want to pay you, that much. Can you take a haircut? He's like, well, release me. I got Edmonton, I got Hamilton, I got Toronto, and I got
Ottawa.
Ottawa, who all need starting quarterbacks. And don't think for a second he's not thinking that as a potential leverage point. But as you said, Calgary is smart. And I think by getting Jake Muir signed, they're not leaving this up.
Insurance. He's
He's the
insurance.
insurance.
He's definitely insurance, and he's a good policy. You know, this year he proved that he was a starting quarterback in the Canadian Football League. Is he a winner? Yeah, he proved it on the short term. We don't know yet whether he can do it on the long term.
He reminds me of Nick Arbuckle in a way, in that he showed that he can fill in if your their season didn't go in the tank because Bo Levi Mitchell got hurt. So that speaks a lot to Jake Muir. It's very similar to Nick Arbuckle. I think it's a very similar situation where we have to have this guy just in case.
It kills me that that you hear Jones talking about
Poor Nick Arbuckle. I will say this:
talking about a quarterback in Saskatchewan, wondering, is Cody Fajardo a real quarterback? I don't really think he's that good. I mean, he doesn't think he's that good. Is he sending a message to his quarterback and basically saying, you're not that good either because you haven't done much more than he has? I don't know. Is this a motivational thing that he's doing? Because nothing is better for an opposing team than have the coach on the other team tell you, the guy you got leading your team, he's no good. He's not that great.
We've seen similar situations before, but that's ugly, because what happens if you end up needing him? But you know what? A lot of quarterbacks, I think Nick Arbuckle in a way is like this. They'll say, "Okay, this is a chance for I have to prove myself, because it's clearly I haven't proven it yet." So they have to do it themselves. And so if I'm Nick Arbuckle, I'm taking the approach of, okay, I got to show it if I get the opportunity. So if, let's say, they bring in a quarterback in Edmonton, and Nick Arbuckle's still there, it should be his job to show that, you know what, I don't bet against me right away.
I can't imagine what's going through his head when he hears something like that.
Well,
Because now Jones can be really tough with him, and
yeah,
like he can really make it clear that he's expecting a lot from Arbuckle. Because if Fajardo doesn't make Jones happy in Saskatchewan with what he's done, that team's played pretty well the last 2 years. Finished first the last season, made it to the they lost to Winnipeg, the eventual Grey Cup champ. I think they've been a pretty good team under Fajardo. He's been hard on himself. He's been doubtful of himself. He's had doubt pushed into his mind with the way things have gone for him recently. But I think he's a lot better than what Jones is saying he is, and I think Arbuckle can be too. But he didn't show it here in Toronto, David. He had every chance. They gave him the ball. McLeod Bethel Thompson was said, "Take a seat, hold my clipboard, would you?" And Arbuckle got injured, a combination of getting injured and being not that effective, in my opinion.
Yeah, and let's not forget he came into a situation that benefited him, right?
He
A
was given
coach,
the keys coming in.
not just the coach that liked him, but he had three,
Receivers
4 receivers he worked with on another team that came in. Like basically, McLeod Bethel Thompson was at the start line,
uphill
and,
battle.
and Nick Arbuckle was 10 meters ahead of him.
And you know what? He was driven to that position. Right? He was in the golf cart. And then
Yeah, he didn't even have to walk to that
he didn't
starting
even have
block.
to walk to that spot. They just put him in a golf cart. Says, okay, you're starting 10 meters in front of
Yeah,
in front of
but and
McLeod
and
Bethel Thompson. But that's why McLeod got so much respect from his teammates, the coach, and not the fans, though, sadly. He got it from me, and I think he got it from you too, because, for those of us that follow the team, we became very aware that he was the dark horse,
yeah,
you know, none of us thought that he was going to be given the kind of chance or earn the chance that he got. He got a pretty good chance there. He changed
yeah,
some minds.
yeah, he did, and I'm curious to see what happens with him.
Right.
I think it kind of says a little bit that he hasn't been signed yet, because, but at the same time, this is a guy who's believed in himself. We'll see where that leads him going into free agency, and if another team decides they want to take the chance with him. But yeah,
Unfortunately, pro sports is what have you done for me lately? In his case, it's whatever have you done for me? That's the problem. There's quarterbacks that prove they can play in this league, but can they dominate? Can they win a big game? All you do is you just look at Caleros, what he did, right? Went to Winnipeg and got her done. That's a winning quarterback. You can say, oh well, he played for Winnipeg, but Nichols was there with that same team, and I think the team has been that good the last not just 2 years, 2 seasons. Can't use years, can we? 2 seasons. That team's been good the last 4 seasons like that. They have been dominant for the last 4 years, and these last 2 years they've had a quarterback that can carry his end of the bargain, right? Because it doesn't matter how good a defense is, the quarterback's got to do something. Doesn't matter how good the Argo defense was. McLeod Bethel Thompson was supposed to put him in the end zone. If he puts them in the end zone, they show up for the Grey Cup, and goodness knows what happens from there. So this is not me throwing shade on McLeod Bethel Thompson, just stating a simple fact. You're given an opportunity to win. If you don't win, you're not the quarterback that you need to be. If you do, you are. And then you got to prove it again next year. That's the beauty of being a quarterback. That's the pressure of that position. Ask
yeah,
Bo Levi Mitchell. Ask Mike Riley. They'll tell you.
yeah, for sure. Tell Ricky Ray.
There is no rest on your laurels when you're a quarterback. If you rest on your laurels, you'll be resting on them somewhere else other than in the locker room or on the field, under center. So yeah, that's the reality. McLeod Bethel Thompson has hit a wall a few years now. He has not broken through the wall that he's been in front of. He has been on the precipice of greatness. He truly has. He's been in the position where he can be great, but it would have taken a great couple of plays by him. So yeah, so as far as quarterbacks is concerned, as far as Bo Levi Mitchell's concerned, he can go places because people know that he's done it before. That's why Winnipeg wanted Caleros, because they knew he had it in him. They just didn't know whether physically he would be allowed to be that person. And if the Argos had any faith in him, they wouldn't have traded him. But because they had other quarterbacks they felt were safer bets, they went with the safer bets. And Caleros benefited from it greatly in the last 2 CFL seasons. That's my rant.
Good rant. Good rant. No, I totally agree. We talk about what's the most important position, and look how many quarterbacks are still trying to figure it out for themselves.
Got to get past that gall darn hump. You know, talked about Cody Fajardo. Another example. Great quarterback has been to the precipice of greatness, but for some reason just can't break through, and it's frustrating when you can't break through. You want any proof? Anybody in Saskatchewan not notice any frustration in that kid? I mean, you know, it's what he has. You look at quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, they get chances. Quarterbacks are lucky in the Canadian Football League, in my opinion, because there are a lot of quarterbacks out there, but Canadian football, the league as a whole, they circulate quarterbacks rather than they disappear. You don't see that many quarterbacks disappear out of the Canadian Football League. Think about it. Think about it. Mike Riley circulated before he became successful. He was around, and he got the Grey Cup in Edmonton, but he was in a couple of places before that happened. Ricky
No,
Ray. Let's talk about the great quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League that we know. There's no Warren Moons anymore. You don't have those. Russ Jackson. Those are the good old days when a quarterback was great in one place and stayed there. Nowadays, great quarterbacks get around. Caleros is the poster boy for that. And you look at oh my goodness, Ottawa Red Blacks coaching now in the U.S. Harris, not Harris. Geez.
Oh, Henry Burke.
Henry Burris, thank you. Henry Burris, same thing. He got around, right? Then he won a championship. So,
he really got around.
Right? So, the Canadian Football League likes quarterbacks. It's like a family. Well, we'll keep you in the league. There's got to be a place for you. They get every chance in the world. And it's because they learn the Canadian game. It's the advantage they have. Once an American quarterback learns the Canadian game, he's an asset in waiting. In some cases, they wait a little longer than others.
No, I totally agree. I think keeping quarterbacks in this league long enough that they go through the ups and downs, the adversity this league provides, only makes them better. Look at the two best. I would say the two arguably the longest right now, the longest tenure quarterbacks, Levi Mitchell, Michael Riley. Both have won. Both have been outstanding quarterbacks because they stayed here and they stuck with the Canadian game and they embraced the Canadian game. I think you look at all the other quarterbacks right now that are trying to find their place. I'm going to put Trevor Harris right in the middle of that. If he sticks with it, he will get there. Only if he sticks with it.
He has to find that opportunity to get to the precipice. It didn't happen with Montreal. Montreal brought him in because they thought, we might be able to get this guy to the precipice, right? Where he does his part. And they were right. They could have done that. They didn't, but they could have. They had the team to get there. The Argos had the team to get there. Saskatchewan had the team to get there, right? Calgary had the team to get there. But what happened? Hamilton and Winnipeg got there, right? And then when it came to the championship game, Hamilton got their two quarterbacks there. Two of them could have done it for them. They had two quarterbacks in the Grey Cup that were brought to the precipice of winning that championship, and they didn't quite do it. And once again, Caleros did it. That's what it's all about. The Canadian Football League is all about opportunity. And the quarterbacks, if an American quarterback comes to the Canadian Football League, he can have a home. Mark my words. Here's what I'm going to say about, because this is we talk and I hope we listen to. McLeod Bethel Thompson could win a Grey Cup in a place other than Toronto. Just think about that. I don't doubt it for a second. I really don't. And Trevor Harris could win a Grey Cup, God knows where, right? Because that's the Canadian Football League today. Quarterbacks are portable. That's why Calgary is so special, and they're going to prove how special they are. Like I said earlier, they're too smart to let Bo Levi Mitchell go.
Yeah. I know we're pressed for time, so I'll just say this, that Zach Caleros is further proof that if you stick with it, he had every opportunity in 2019 to hang it up and say, you know what, That concussion was the last one for me.
That's all I'm
He
doing.
didn't. He found the situation that was best for him. He made it work. He stayed, and he was rewarded twice. So I think if you're a quarterback right now in the CFL, if you're listening to this show, God bless you if you are. That I think would be my model. Stick with it. You talk to any other quarterback that was in the CFL, Anthony Calvillo. Where did his journey start, and where did it end? I think that's the important advice I would give to any quarterback that wants to make in this league. Even though I don't have the experience of playing the game, by watching it and seeing what other quarterbacks have done, sticking with it always seems, usually for the most part, pays off.
And every one of them at some point, even before and after they win a championship, are in doubt. That's the Canadian Football League. Quarterbacks got to win. That's all the quarterbacks there to do. That's how he looks pretty. David, it was a fun show.
Thank you again, Frank.
Oh, my pleasure. For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.